The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and thanks for joining today's webinar with Varonis, looking at how you can classify and control your data in order to stop data risks falling under the radar and data theft falling under the radar. My name is Shona Bradshaw. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dave Philpotts from Varonis, who'll be taking through the bulk of today's presentation. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start, an agenda. I'll do a very brief introduction to Bytes. Many of you know us already, so I will keep it exceptionally brief before introducing Dave and Varonis and introducing our partnership with them. Dave will be taking you through, why knowing where your sensitive data is not an easy question, but an absolutely critical one in order to be able to protect your business from risk. He'll be walking you through some of the ways in which data classification and the data analytics that Varonis provide can help you answer who's looking at sensitive data, where it is, and all of those really critical questions, and also running you through some best practices in data management and data classification to assist in reducing your business risk. We will have an interactive Q&A at the end, so please do put your questions via the chat or questions box throughout the presentation as they occur to you, and I will pose them all to David at the end. So housekeeping for today's session, attendee lines will be on mute throughout the presentation, but as I have said, we do welcome questions. Please do post questions via the chat or the questions box, and I'll make sure that those are answered at the end. We will keep discussions today to strategy and solutions. We won't go into depth on commercials or financials on any product on this session. Of course, those questions are more than welcome via your Bytes account manager post session. We are recording today's session and we'll make that available to you after the event so you can share what insight within your wider business. And a quick request from me, we do have a feedback survey at the end. It's intended to, very short 5-question survey, which is just intended to make sure that these sessions are hitting the mark for you technically and providing you with useful insights. So who are Bytes? Bytes Security Partnerships are the specialist security partner within the Bytes Allied Electronics Group. What we really aim to do as a company is to marry up the agility and the insight and the specialism that you would expect from the smallest, most specialist partner with the global resources and the scale to support your projects that comes from being part of a large group. We're exceptionally proud internally of the technical services and the technical solutions that we wrap around products such as Varonis that we work with. We have a dedicated third line in-house consultancy team. We offer security support for solutions, product roadmap updates, etc., etc. And that enables us to enjoy top-tier vendor statuses with a variety of different partners to provide you with a truly independent view on the marketplace. We work across the full spectrum of information security. Traditionally, we would be working in the network security space, next generation firewalls and web security. And over the years, we've developed to be really pioneering and looking at advanced technologies to detect and to protect your businesses against advanced threats, whether that's if you're looking to move to the cloud, whether you're looking to secure more increased mobility within your organization, or whether you're looking to defeat more advanced, very slow and slow attacks that are typically falling under the radar. Across all of these technology areas, what we provide as a business is that pair of hands and that expert team to augment your security teams. So whether you're looking for technology delivery and installation, whether you're looking to scope out and develop your security strategy and future-proof your business, or whether you're looking for market and technology updates to ensure that you are at the forefront of defeating advanced attacks. That's where Bytes would get involved, recommending technologies that may fit to match your business needs and then helping you deliver them excellently. So that's more than enough about us. Why are we speaking to businesses around classification and control? Specifically, why are we speaking to people post-GDPR? Because there's an element of thinking that says, everyone should already have classified their data because, we're all GDPR compliant. Sadly, that is not always the case. There's an ever-growing data sprawl, so there is more data and businesses are generating more data, and data is held in an increasing amount of places. So there is a lack of knowledge in organisations around what is the critical data that they need to protect and how do they best do that? Where is it stored and who is actually accessing that data? Because of that, attackers are increasingly slipping under the radar and targeting the most sensitive data. And that, why would an attacker, have a massive fight with your next generation firewall when they can use sneaky or less intrusive methods of getting to critical data and using people's accreditations, using people's logins and targeting specific, very high value data. Classification is really key to developing what we call just enough security. So rather than trying to secure everything and security teams having massive tasks in order to manual tasks to try and secure the whole set of their data across every channel, focusing security and focusing just enough security in the right areas is key to avoiding waste and reducing risk. And all of this is available, and you can take automated approaches to achieve it, therefore reducing a lot of the manual tasks and the manual overhead that you have within your security and infrastructure teams. So to give you a bit of an overview of how that can work for your business, we're delighted to welcome David Philpotts from Varonis today. We've been working with Varonis for several years. They're a gold partner of ours, and they really do lead the way in data classification and data analytics, particularly in protecting unstructured and valuable data, and in ways that businesses can actually protect the data that matters most, that's the most difficult to actually find and classify. Varonis are a real global force and protect companies and provide data classification and data analytics solutions for across 150 countries and more than 6,000 companies. So they have an absolute vast realm and resources of experience in order to give you a really good overview of some new strategies and new solutions that you can deploy to make data classification and answer the very simple question of where's your valuable data much easier. So with that in mind, all that it remains for me to do is to hand over to David. And David's going to be taking you through the bulk of today's presentation and giving you some insights into the power of data classification. And I'll be coming back on at the end to pose your questions to David. Over to Dave. So if you can just share your screen for us, Dave. And I'm going to mute myself off.
Can you see that now?
I can indeed. I'm just going to go silent now to avoid any feedback.
Thank you, Shona. So, hello everybody. My name is Dave Philpotts. I'm a sales engineer at Varonis. I've been with Varonis for nearly 2 years now, but I've worked with the Varonis solution for 8 years. Prior to joining Varonis, I worked for various managed service providers, and we had customers who were using the Varonis solution. And back then, it was very much about permissions visibility, all the things that I'm going to show you today, that they weren't in that solution, and I still thought it was some of the coolest technology that I'd ever seen. And bear in mind, managed service providers, we dealt with a lot of technology, and hence why I've now joined Varonis. And so my role as a sales engineer is obviously I'm the technical arm of a sales relationship. So I run data risk assessments for customers. I perform evaluations, POCs for prospects. So I'm really well placed to talk about what we're going to talk about today. The presentation that I've put together is hopefully going to educate you on the types of attacks that are happening today, that we're seeing in our customer base, and the methodology that people typically will go through when they're trying to get to your data. Of course, we want to, obviously show you how Varonis can help and how we're developing our security analytics to be able to identify, investigate, give meaningful contextual alerts so that you can investigate and make a decision on what you need to do much, much quicker. So we're currently running some live cyber attack workshops. This is being run by our cyber ops team. So these are a team of security specialists within Varonis that are available to Varonis customers in the event that they're experiencing either a cyber attack or an insider threat or ransomware, something that's not right in their environment. You can call on this resource and they will come in and they'll help you do a forensic analysis of what's going on. So they're running these live cyber attack workshops. The URL's there if you can go and register and sign up for them. They're being run every week. I think Tuesdays and Thursdays are the best times really for the UK. They run out the US, but don't let that put you off. And it's a fantastic way to see a real-time attack happening using the tools that attackers are using right now to try and breach your environments. So I'm going to start with a story. You know, everyone loves a story. So Premera, they are a US-based health insurance company, and about 2 years ago, they had a breach. Now, the breach included approximately 11 million records of PII. This was social security numbers, lots of PII information, banking information, email addresses. An investigation occurred, and they determined that it was took place by a hacking group that was also responsible for another breach, another health insurance company called Anthem. So what happened as part of this breach? So the chain of events that we now know that happened are a Premera employee, they clicked on a link in a phishing email. And this link, it enabled hackers to plant malware onto the organization's network. And this malware was called Photo. And it had the capability to upload and download files. They'd configured Photo to communicate with a website called precuse.com. And analysis, when the security investigation happened, the analysis of the security logs at Premera found thousands and hundreds of thousands of almost every day contact, and this had been going on for more than 6 months when they found this out. What they found were there were fragments of RAR files that were left over. You know, we all know what RAR files are from compression software, and they used this to shrink the files before they exfiltrated the data. What they then discovered as part of the investigation was the attackers actually had access to over a couple of dozen workstations and endpoints and servers. And the one workstation that started the attack belonged to a software developer. And that software developer had all sorts of tools that he needed to do his job, primarily admin tools, and they allow for easy privilege escalation and data exfiltration. There was very little logging of information going on the network or about what user activity was occurring, and they didn't have any data on what had been removed. So the only information they had was what was out there in the world when it got published on the dark web. So in order to do the forensic investigation, they needed to go and look at the workstations that had happened. Unfortunately, the only one that would have had any useful information was this software developer's workstation, and they'd have been told the best thing to do was to wipe it. So this machine had been wiped. All the information that would have been on it has gone. In fact, they reprovisioned that desktop into another user. So why am I telling you this story? Well, it all maps to a cyber kill chain story. So basically what happens is the attackers will get in, they start to escalate their privileges, and they find out what they need, you know, what's in the environment, what they're going to go and attack. They go and grab it, and then they exfiltrate that data, often under the guise of legitimate admin activity or using admin type tools. So it's very difficult to detect. So now let's break that down and look at what the anatomy of this breach and modern breaches are and how they occur. So I'm sure many of you on the call are aware of this. It's the Varonis cyber kill chain. And you know, attacks, they typically follow a story. And for cyber attacks, we call it the kill chain. And in order to detect these attacks, you need to have implemented, you know, instrumentation, detection software at each stage of the kill chain. So what Varonis have done, we take all sorts of different types of events, all sorts of types of suspicious activity, and we've written what we describe as threat models. These are behavioral-based alerts that are able to detect, pick up, and identify different stages of the kill chain as the hacker infiltrates, starts to run their reconnaissance, run their lateral movement, and then when they start to exfiltrate the data. So let's start at the beginning of this. Let's work our way through and understand, exactly what an attack looks like. So we're going to start with, the infiltration and privilege escalation phase. So what we're looking at here is a list of 11 of our threat models. Now, this is a very small subset of all the Varonis threat models in our data security platform. Each of these threat models are pre-built, they're predefined. You don't have to do anything other than turn them on. We do all the hard work so that you don't have to. So they use the identity of the employee. We use all of the behaviour, all of their file touches, all of their mailbox touches, how they log into their devices, any DNS queries they use, websites they visit, etc., etc. We use their role within the business, and we use their peer relationships and a whole load of other variables to identify behaviour that may be automated, but that certainly appears as suspicious. So if we start from the top here, how do they actually get in? Well, in Premera, if you remember, that was a phishing link. This is another way. So we have at the top here, abnormal access behavior, possible distributed credential stuffing attack. So this is probably a password, an attacker trying to guess usernames and passwords, which is probably the most important for low and slow type attacks. So they've taken a dictionary of usernames and passwords, perhaps from the LinkedIn breach from years ago, and they're trying to get in through a VPN. So they're just going through every password, username and password combination that they can until they get hit and they get a credential match. So this model detects an unusual amount of your login attempts with valid usernames, indicating that passwords might be attackers might be trying to guess passwords. So there's probably been lots of failures, and then suddenly we see the second down there, which is successful brute force attack targeting a specific account. So this indicates that an attacker has successfully guessed a password. So we detect an abnormal number of authentication failures from a single IP or a single user account followed by a successful login. And this is one of the key things about Varonis. All of the logs that we take from all of the disparate sources, we normalize, we pass all the events, and we make it very simple to understand that their behavior that's been suggesting that there's been a brute force attack. And then we've seen a login during that brute force attack. So it's very easy for you as a security analyst or your security analyst to identify what's happened. So the next thing they do, and you can liken this to someone coming and burgling a house, is they've got in through the front door, and now they're starting to have a look around. So they're starting to run some reconnaissance activities. Now reconnaissance in a cyber attack is finding data sources. Where are the servers, the SharePoint sites, Exchange servers, wherever or whatever is interesting in that business, wherever contains sensitive information that I can steal and then monetize. So I'm going to sell this stuff and make loads of money from it. So in here, we can see abnormal DNS reverse lookup requests to different IPs. So what's a reverse DNS lookup? Well, I know the IP of the machine that I'm sitting on. I can work out what the IP range of the network is, but I don't know any of the host names there. So I'm going to run a quick script. So I'm going to download that through my command and control center, and I'm going to start to query DNS servers. The DNS server is going to start to tell me all the names of the servers that sit in that IP range. And now I know where I want to go and attack, because typically server names, they typically align to what they're doing. So, a file server might have an FIL in it, an Exchange server might be EXC, SharePoint, SHA, etc., etc. So this model would detect a statistically significant increase in DNS reverse lookup requests. And when it's seen that increase, it will then start to learn. So again, you understand that there's a reconnaissance attack happening within your environment. So now we move on, and we're starting to see some lateral movement. So they've mapped the environment, and now they're starting to try and get into those machines. So we start to see unusual amounts of logons to personal devices. So because we're capturing that user information, we know which devices users use, and we align them to those devices. So where we see other accounts starting to log on to those personal devices, that's abnormal behavior. In fact, in this threat model here, it's abnormal service behavior. So we've identified this as a service account, and that's really unusual for a service account to start logging into personal devices. This account doesn't own those devices. We also trigger off an abnormal behavior, unusual amount of devices accessed. So again, this is we're seeing, this user account or this service account starting to touch an unusual amount of devices. It doesn't normally do this. It's increased touching devices. And these attempts may have been successful or they may have been unsuccessful. But one of the ways they can be more successful is by escalating their privileges. And a really, really common way of doing this is a pass the ticket attack. If you don't know what pass the ticket attacks are, it's a very simple method of stealing Kerberos tickets that are given to you from a domain controller that resides in memory of the computer that you're on, and it may even give you an admin ticket. If not, then there are certainly methods for getting those types of tickets as well. And then you can use that stolen ticket to start to authenticate and log on to these other data sources. So let's just recap what we've been through so far. So we've seen a brute force attack on a user credentials to get into the network, and we've seen that they've successfully got into the network. We've seen some reconnaissance via reverse DNS. They're finding the data sources where they want to go and find information. And now we're starting to see lateral movement onto those other machines. They may have been successful, they probably have, or they've probably failed in the initial attempt, but now they've grabbed an authentication ticket from Kerberos attack, and they're going to start using those, potentially an admin ticket, start logging into those data sources. So once they're in, they're inside your environment, what are they targeting? Well, they're going to go for the data, and unfortunately, we make it all too easy for them. I run data risk assessments on customers and prospects all the time, and as a business, Varonis run thousands of these a year across the world, and each year we bring out what we call our data risk report findings. So this is the one that we ran for 2018. We've taken a sample of 130 organisations, and really the figures are absolutely terrifying. So 41% of those businesses had at least 1,000 sensitive files open to every single employee. 21% of folders are open to global group access. That means that anybody on your network can access those folders. And, I could talk through the rest of the slide, but you can see it all there. Fundamentally, we as IT professionals are failing to protect information that sits in the unstructured space. And GDPR came along and some definite improvements were made, but fundamentally it still sits that this data is massively overexposed. I have yet to do a data risk assessment, even post May this year when GDPR came into force, that has shown me that businesses are taking this seriously. So the point of this is, once someone has compromised your network, they've compromised the perimeter security, which can be pretty easy. Go and look at those cyber attack workshops and just see how easy it can be. They are basically given free rein to get access to all the sensitive information within your business. So now we're starting to touch sensitive data. Can they touch that sensitive data? So, Varonis is primarily placed because when we talk around sensitive data, what we're talking about there is the PII information or perhaps SharePoint affecting data for your business that Varonis data classification can go out and understand. So we go and interrogate all the files on your unstructured data sources, your file servers, your NAS devices, SharePoint, OneDrive in Office 365. And we look for that sensitive information, financial information, PII. We have PII information rules for all 28 member states of GDPR. And they are out the box. And we have payment credit card information, PCI rules as well, to go and find where credit card information sits on your network. And you can create your own custom rules. So if there's specific project codes that you guys are looking to protect, and I look after one aerospace manufacturer who does work for both Boeing and Airbus, and clearly those two businesses want to make sure that their data sits apart. So we specifically go and look for Airbus part codes and Boeing part codes and make sure that they are secure. So it could be any of those sorts of things. Once we've classified that as sensitive information, we can then add that context into these alerts within our threat analytics. So what we're looking at here is an abnormal behavior, access to an unusual amount of idle sensitive data. So we've detected an account that's starting to touch sensitive data that they haven't touched for a long time, hence why it's idle to them. These could be obviously the credit card information, or it could be health records in the case of the breach earlier. But this is the data that you really need to worry about. Also, we're seeing abnormal service behavior. So again, it's a service account and it's touching atypical mailboxes. So it's starting to go and look at mail in exchange. It's got privileges that it probably shouldn't have, being a service account. It's been compromised potentially, and it's starting to dip into people's mailboxes, starting to download some of that email. And we all know that people use email as a filing system. They send some very sensitive documents around using email. It's a very big data source with lots and lots of risk involved in it. But the most important thing about this slide really is that you have the context, so you know that it's sensitive information, and that's what Varonis is really good at providing. So they've gone in, they've had a good poke around, they've managed to up their access, they found where all the data is stored, and then they've started to manage to get access to your sensitive data, and now they're going to take it out of the company. So that's called exfiltration. So we have these threat models, they're all predefined, and they can identify and spot data when it's being taken out of the network. So we have here abnormal behavior. Unusual amount of data was uploaded to an external website after accessing GDPR data. So this is a GDPR specific threat model. We know that it's GDPR data. We've classified it as such using our data classification engine. And we're monitoring the websites that this user is going to. And we know it's unusual for them to go to these websites. We also know that it's unusual the amount of information that they've started to upload. So here's someone that's accessed a bunch of personal information, GDPR data, and then they've uploaded it to an external website. And we have visibility of the data stores, and we know the sensitivity of the data of the files that are in, that what they're looking at. And we've collated that in one simple, easy to read process, and called it a threat model, to say that someone's touched PII and they've chucked it up to a website. If you think about what you would need to do that yourself, it's incredibly powerful. It's very, very difficult, if not nearly impossible, to do this with a typical SIEM. If you think about all the different events that you need from all the different sources, you would need to cross-reference, bring into your SIEM, collate. And this is really the beauty of what Varonis does. We do all that hard work for you, and we present it in an easily actionable form. So there's another one in here, service account, again, uploading data to external websites. So, really unusual that you'd have a service account uploading that sort of information. Oh, excuse me. And then finally, we've got data exfiltration via DNS tunneling, and it's very, very common. It's very, very slow, but it's beautiful in its simplicity, and it really does sit under the radar. And yeah, so if you don't know what it is, so DNS tunneling, it basically involves sending packets of information out, which they split the files into chunks, and then they send them as DNS queries to DNS servers hosting domains they control. So the data sits, it's encoded, but it sits in the DNS hostname that they're looking up. They then capture all that DNS activity from their DNS server that they control. They strip off all the information from the query, and then they just recompile the file at the end of it. So it's very slow, but we can see, thousands of, hundreds of thousands of DNS queries going out with this information. If you've got terabytes of data that you're trying to get out, it's perhaps not the best way to do it, but it's certainly very hard to detect. So, I mean, as we can see here, there's a variety of different ways a hacker can steal information from your network without you really being aware of it. So does this all sound familiar? Well, unfortunately, yes, it does. So the OPI, the Office of Personnel Management, is another massive data breach from the last few years that can be traced directly back to lack of security on the file systems. So it was just over 4 million personnel records of former and current government employees, nearly 6 million fingerprints, and 21.5 million security clearance background files, which included things like mental health history, any alcohol abuse, gambling issues, and other very, very personal information to people. When they had to report this to Congress, the director of IT security operations said they found out it was a Visual Basic script running and scanning all of the unstructured data. And they weren't looking for this stuff on the unstructured. They were securing all the databases, but they just weren't looking on unstructured data. And ironically, it was the OPM who did the initial security audit of Premera and who told them that their security controls were lacking in the first place. So yeah, I guess the message there is practice what you preach. Another huge one that we've had in the news recently, Equifax. So it's not really a surprise that they were targeted. I mean, if you think about all the information that they hold, of course they're going to be targeted. Of course they are. But what happens if you're not looking in the right place? So Equifax, they're a huge company. They've got huge amounts of important data, and they made a point of saying it wasn't their core databases that were breached. It was certain files. So they were protecting all their databases, but they weren't looking, they were completely in the dark on their file structured space. So this is what we see in lots of organizations. And when I talk to businesses and they say, yeah, we're not worried about unstructured data, all our information's held in databases, unfortunately, it's just not true. Experience tells us it's just not true. Equifax, this data, these files, so they were sitting in home drives, personal shares on the file server, and they were extracts of these databases that contain personal information. I see it an awful lot in businesses. If you have a CRM application, or if you've got a call center that are taking notes into a call logging system about users, then developers or people who are doing checkups on the quality of the data, they will export that data into spreadsheets, into Word documents, text files, and it will be all over your unstructured data space, unstructured data sources on your file servers. And that's the stuff, if you're not looking at that information, that's the stuff that the attackers are going to take. And that's exactly what happened with Equifax. And every ransomware attack, we see it an awful lot as well. They're incredibly devastating. And if you consider, if people have got access to all this data, 24% of data is open to everybody, then that's 24% of your unstructured data that's going to get encrypted by ransomware. Could you afford that as a business? What's in that data? If you're not classifying it, how big is that impact to your business? It attacks data that you're not looking at. It attacks the dark data, and until you turn the lights on and understand what that is, you are really, really exposed. So why are we still exposed? Well, I don't know if you've noticed it, if you've ever been to RSA, there are an awful lot of companies out there who will tell you that their solution, their next gen firewall, their APT system is the answer to all your woes. And there's a huge amount of cybersecurity spend available that you can spend on all those different companies. I'm not going to preach to you too much here, but I would absolutely urge you, whichever way you go, you make sure that you have visibility of your unstructured data. We know it's what's being gone after. We know it's overexposed. In some cases. Why haven't you archived that? Why haven't you removed that from your systems and taken that risk away? Have you involved the business? Do you understand who owns the data? And also, how do I enable them? How do I get them involved? And am I alerted? Do I understand when that data's been stolen, when it's been exfiltrated, when it's been touched by people it shouldn't have been? If you can't answer those questions on your unstructured space, that data is still in the dark to you, and it's a huge security risk. So Varonis is focused on that unstructured data. We give visibility into all those data sources you see there, Windows, SharePoint, OneDrive. We've just started to turn on additional cloud storage platforms that we're looking into. We look at the permission structure, we look at the users groups, we understand who's got access to what data, we classify that data, so we understand which of that part of that data is sensitive. We see how users are interacting with that data, and then we can start also to take in perimeter telemetry as well, so proxy, VPN, and DNS. And then because of all this good context that we can bring into it, we can start to tell you, who should have access to this data, who should be a data owner for it, where's my high risk data that I absolutely need to lock down now, where's the information that I need to protect, where's all my stale data, the data's not been touched for 3 years or more, and we can help you move it and archive it, and we can help you retain it if you need to retain it because it's financial information that you have to retain for 7 years or whatever's pertinent to your business. We can help you do that. And it's this metadata, we call it a metadata framework, that really turns on that light for you. We have an operational white paper process. We call it a journey to maturity, and what this is a framework for you to manage your unstructured data. It's split into 3 phases and 2 sub-phases in each of those. Fundamentally, the first phase is what we describe as detect. This is very much turning on the lights, understanding where your dark data is, so classifying it, understanding who has access to it, and starting to monitor it. And then start to turn on some reporting and turn on some alerting. So at least I know if bad stuff's happening, and at least I can start reporting into my compliance and governance parts of my business to enable them to make some decisions on it. And then when that's all started to happen, we take all the information that we've learnt and we start to fix the problem. So we move into this prevent phase and we start to remove all that global access, and we would target the sensitive data that's globally exposed first of all. Then we would start to mop up the residual global access and start that quarantining or archiving or even deleting of all that stale data just to de-risk it from your business. This part, we need to start getting the business involved as well. So we need to align to data owners. So we need to understand who they are. And because we're capturing user interaction with data, we can give you some really good context around who your data owners should be. So rather than going out to the business and saying, do you own this folder? How, what's the data that's in it? All this sort of stuff. We can provide you up front with a list of recommended data owners that you can go to and say, we think that you should own this data. Here's the evidence that you are the guys who are touching this. So we believe this should be you. And then we move into that world of sustain, which is all around that frightening word of automation. So this is where we've got down to a least privilege model. Only the people who should have access to data have got access to that data, and we move into that self-service world of users requesting access directly from data owners, not having to go to IT anymore, and IT doing the best that they can do, but actually it's the data owner who should say, yes, that person, Bob in account, should have access to my data. Yes, I can do that, and I can do that within a self-service portal, and then also, once a month, once a quarter, once a year, whatever it is, they have to do an attestation or data access review to say, actually, yes, I attest that this list of users is the correct users for access to my data, and just continually reiterate that through that entire process. And you can start this on, it can seem daunting if you're going to do it all your data in one go, but you can start this very much on a subset of your data, or even just data that's going into the cloud or Office 365, whatever is pertinent. Run it through with that process, the entire process end to end with that data subset, and then push it out across your business. Or a department, start with HR, start with finance. They're the people who hold the really sensitive data. Run it through with their data first. If you speak to your HR or your finance director and say, do you want to control who has access to your data, 9 times out of 10 they'll say, yeah, of course we do, of course we do. Particularly if you can show them how bad it is right now. So part of the way that we would do that is by running these data risk assessments. So this is a report into your information. We would come in, deploy our platform. We would look at where your sensitive information is. So we'd run our classification rules against it. We would see, who has access to it and where that potentially is overexposed. We'd start to tell you who's got access to what. Are any of your users acting strangely or maliciously, and also where your stale data is. Where have I got data that's not been touched for 3 years? Can I archive it? Can I quarantine it? Can I delete it? So we can give you a very good understanding of what your unstructured space looks like on your environment. It's very light touch from your part as well. So the sales engineers at Varonis run these all the time, and it's a really good way of empowering you and educating the business of this problem that you may have within your business. So I'm conscious of time, so thank you for your time now. Or just flip back and just see if there's been any questions.
Okay, so if you can kindly send any questions that you have for Dave regarding some of the attacks he talked through, or regarding some of the technologies in terms of how Varonis can help in detecting, maleficent behaviour on your data, please do put them through. I'll give it about a minute to collect any questions. Whilst you hopefully do put a few questions in for Dave, I'd just like to thank Dave very much for his time in presenting today and giving us a really comprehensive overview both of some of the attacks that have happened in the real world to organisations on their unstructured data, and also some of the technology and the insights he shared as regards the attack chain and how Varonis can help mitigate threats at each stage of that. I'd like also to thank everyone for their time in attending today. I do appreciate that it is increasingly hard to take time out of your own diaries, given your very busy roles, to attend such sessions. So I hope that you've gleaned some value from today's session. So I haven't got any questions through at the moment. Oh, I have one question just popped up. And it's a question from the audience, and this is regarding data and how Varonis determine what is sensitive. So the question is, how does Varonis actually determine what is sensitive, or PII, versus what is standard, in inverted commas, data?
Okay, that's a really good question, so thank you for that. So we have our data classification engine, and within the data classification engine, we have pre-built rules for looking for this PII information, and these rules are built by our team, and they consist of lots of patterns, regexes, this type of information, looking for what we would classify as PII. So if we take our GDPR rules as an example, these were put together by a whole different load of sources. So we spoke to some consultants in the area as to what they would suggest would be PII. We spoke to the sales engineering team, and we spoke to our customers to say, what do you class as PII? And we took all that information, we created a subset of rules, and then we ran them on our customer estates, and we saw what we got back, and then we continually tune those as well. So in the GDPR example, we're looking for things like banking information, sort name, sort codes, bank information, postcodes, phone numbers, national insurance numbers for the UK, or national identity numbers globally, passport numbers, all these different types of things, but in combination as well. So for example, a phone number on its own does not constitute PII. So we wouldn't just say, right, there's a phone number in this document, therefore that document contains sensitive information. We would need to see that phone number in conjunction with other information, be it like a national insurance number, or a passport number, or something that is identifiable to a person. So it's quite a complicated rule base, but what we have found is the latest iteration of these rules gives you some very high fidelity results, which are good, credible matches to PII information, rather than a whole host of thousands and thousands and thousands of files that just contain phone numbers or just contain postcodes or something like that. So we use a technology called Oracle Outside In to actually go and interrogate those files against that rule base. And as I said, you can create your own custom files as well. So for example, I look after a travel company. They hold pilots license numbers, and we created a regular expression to go and find where those pilot license numbers are on their environment. We scanned all their files, and we could tell them where they existed, and where they were exposed, and they were able to lock those down and make sure they were all kept within a certain part of their file estate. So hopefully that answers the question. Sorry, I'll just add on to that as well. So PCI data, we look for credit card information, but we also do a LUN validation check on that as well. So if you don't know what LUN is, you can just go and look it up online, LUHN. If you just take a 16-digit string of numbers, if it doesn't match a LUN validation check, it is not a credit card number. It's just a random string of 16 numbers. So we validate any numbers that we find against the LUN algorithm. But also we look for specific things around it as well. So a 16-digit number that's validated by LUN also doesn't necessarily match a credit card number. In fact, I found it on another customer where all their stock codes happen to match credit card numbers. But we would look for additional keywords in proximity of that number. So things like expiry date, CCV, those sorts of things as well, to match, to guarantee as best as we can that would be a valid credit card hit.
Thank you. That was a really comprehensive answer. Just to add to that, if you require any further information in terms of the methods and the rule base that the Varonis do use in order to identify different types of data and their methodology, we're obviously more than happy to provide that via your Bytes account manager and provide any further information that you would need there. I haven't got any further questions at the moment. I'm just conscious of the time that we're getting towards the 11 o'clock mark. So what I'll do is I'll wrap up now, and then anyone who has any further questions or would like to, to ask anything that occurs to you after the session, then feel free to reach out to myself when I send the recording. You'll have my details, and I can obviously divert any further questions to your Bytes account manager, and they can help you out, whether it's arranging a a data risk assessment that Varonis offer in order to identify what unstructured data you have and the state of the data that you have in your business for free, or whether it's having a further conversation around classification rules, etc. Then we can arrange that afterwards. So I'm going to wrap up now. Thanks very much, David, for your time and for providing these insights today. Thanks everyone for attending. Once again, we have recorded today's session, so I will send that out after the event as well. And thanks everyone. I'm just going to wrap up now and give